Hello, and welcome back to Kookaburra, where knowledge meets inner wisdom. In the previous videos, we looked at how the conscious and subconscious mind work, and how old subconscious programs can continue influencing our behavior long after we have forgotten where they came from. Today, I want to take this one step further, because sometimes what remains in the subconscious is not simply a belief. Sometimes it is an emotion, and that emotion can continue influencing the way we feel, react, and behave many years after the original event has passed. Emotions are part of our experience. Every one of us experiences fear, anger, sadness, disappointment, rejection, embarrassment, and many other emotions. Normally, an emotion arises, we experience it, and eventually it passes. That is a natural part of life. But sometimes an emotional experience is particularly strong, or perhaps we are too young to understand what is happening. Maybe we are frightened, maybe we feel rejected, maybe somebody embarrasses us, or perhaps something happens at a time when we simply do not have the emotional ability to process it properly. The event may eventually disappear from our conscious memory, but something from that experience can remain behind. This is where things become interesting. You may completely forget an event from childhood, but many years later, something happens that carries a similar emotional feeling, and suddenly you react very strongly. Perhaps somebody criticizes you, and you become unusually angry. Someone rejects an idea, and you immediately feel hurt. Someone uses a particular word, and you suddenly become defensive. At the conscious level, your reaction may seem completely reasonable, but sometimes the intensity of the reaction is much greater than the situation really deserves. That is usually a good indication that something deeper may have been triggered. The present situation may only have pressed an old emotional button. I had an interesting reminder of this myself. When I was young, one of my teachers embarrassed me in front of the whole class. He gave me a nickname connected with being lazy. At the time, I probably did what most children do. I carried on with my life, and eventually I forgot about it. Many decades later, during a conversation, somebody told me that I was lazy. My reaction was surprisingly strong. At first, I thought I was simply reacting to what this person had said. But when I looked at my reaction more carefully, I realized something else was happening. That one word had touched an old emotional memory. Suddenly, I could see that my reaction was not entirely about the person in front of me. Part of it belonged to a classroom many decades earlier. That was a very useful reminder for me, because once I recognized where the reaction came from, I could separate the past from the present. What is a trapped emotion? You may have heard the expression trapped emotion. It is a term used by Dr. Bradley Nelson in his work called the Emotion Code. The basic idea is very simple. Sometimes an emotional experience is not completely processed, and something from that experience remains stored within us. You do not necessarily have to accept the term literally. You might prefer to call it an unresolved emotion, an emotional memory, or an old subconscious emotional pattern. For me, the terminology is less important than the observation. An old emotional experience can sometimes continue influencing the present, and I have seen enough examples of this in my own life and in my years working with people to take that possibility seriously. Your body may also respond. Emotions are not experienced only as thoughts. We also feel them physically. Think about what happens when you suddenly become frightened. Your heart may speed up, your stomach may tighten, your breathing changes, your muscles tense. The body participates in the emotional experience. The same happens with anger, embarrassment, grief, or anxiety. This is one reason an old emotional reaction can sometimes feel so immediate. Before you have even had time to think about what happened, your body is already responding. Something has triggered the old pattern. The trigger is not the cause. This distinction is extremely important. The person or event in front of you may be the trigger, but it may not be the original cause. Imagine someone accidentally pressing a button on a machine. They did not build the machine. They only activated something that was already there. Emotional triggers can work in a similar way. Someone says something, someone behaves in a certain way, something happens. And suddenly, an old program switches on. We naturally blame whatever just happened. But sometimes the real question is not, why did this person make me feel this way? A better question might be, why did this affect me so strongly? That small change in the question can open a completely different door. Becoming the observer. This brings us back to something we have already discussed in this series. When you experience a strong emotional reaction, there is a small opportunity to step outside it for a moment. Instead of immediately saying, "This person made me angry," you can observe, "Something in me became very angry." That may sound like a very small difference, but psychologically, it is enormous. You have created a little space between you and the reaction, and inside that space, awareness becomes possible. People sometimes think that emotional healing means digging through their entire childhood and remembering every unpleasant experience. I do not believe that is necessary. Sometimes you will remember the original event, sometimes you will not. What matters initially is simply recognizing the pattern. You might notice, I become defensive whenever somebody questions my intelligence. I feel rejected very easily. I become anxious whenever someone is angry with me. I always feel I have to prove myself. I find it extremely difficult when somebody ignores me. Those reactions are clues. Instead of judging them, become curious about them. A simple exercise. Over the next few days, pay attention to moments when your emotional reaction seems unusually strong. Do not try to suppress the emotion, and do not immediately analyze it to death. Just notice it. Then ask yourself, what exactly affected me? And, does this feeling seem familiar? You may suddenly remember another situation, perhaps childhood, perhaps school, perhaps a relationship, perhaps something you thought you had completely forgotten. And sometimes nothing comes. That is also perfectly fine. The purpose of the exercise is awareness, not forcing an answer. Awareness changes the relationship. There is something very powerful about recognizing. This feeling is happening inside me, but it is not necessarily telling me the truth about what is happening right now. Your emotions are real, but the interpretation attached to them may belong partly to the past. Once you recognize that, you have more choice. Instead of automatically repeating the old reaction, you can begin responding to the present situation as it actually is. That is one of the ways emotional healing begins. This is probably the most important point. You have emotions, you have memories, you have subconscious programs, but they are not the whole of who you are. There is also the part of you that can observe them, and the moment you can observe a pattern rather than automatically becoming the pattern, you have already created the possibility of change. That is why awareness is such an important part of this journey. Dear friends, we are gradually learning to recognize what is happening inside us, rather than simply being carried along by it. In the next video, we are going to move from the inner world to the world around us. We will look at something we normally take completely for granted. How do we actually perceive reality? Is the world we experience an exact representation of what is outside us? Or is our brain constructing much more of that experience than we realize? That is where we will continue. This was Kookaburra, where knowledge meets inner wisdom.